really. In 2011, Jacob Dunne threw a single punch that ended another man's life. He was sentenced to prison for manslaughter, where he served 14 months of a custodial sentence.
Well, once released, he did struggle with readjusting to normal life again. To document the path that led him to prison and out again, Jacob has written a book called Right from Wrong. He's here to tell us about it and how he got his life back on track. Good morning, Jacob, and thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
It's interesting that we are talking a lot about moving on and getting past your problems and seeking forgiveness and maybe forgiving yourself. Is that why you've called it Right from Wrong? Do you believe that right can come out of wrong? Yes,
and it's an ongoing journey, as I document in the book myself. Is the hardest part of my story to kind of process and come to terms with is my ongoing journey of forgiving myself, and forgiveness is a complicated word, and it means different things to different people, and so yes, just trying to stimulate much more of a nuanced conversation around some of these issues and some of the tragic circumstances that have obviously led me to have to think about these issues.
Yes, so Jacob, tell us about that day where one punch changed your entire life.
Yeah, so it was back in 2011, over a decade now, and in Nottingham city centre. One of my friends called me and asked for some help. Me being the young person that I was back then, I didn't question what my friends were asking me to do. I didn't ask, why were you getting into an argument? Have you started this argument? Is this worth it? Unfortunately, I try to help young people to respond instead of react now in moments. And I threw a single punch without asking any questions. And sadly, that man, James, fell over, hit his head, and passed away about 9 days later from his injuries.
I mean, clearly that was terrible for his family and it ended his life, and we must never forget that. But how did that affect you?
Well, I was a young man with not many prospects and little hope, no qualifications, very poor mental health, and so I guess just going to prison was just a trajectory that I knew I was already on, sadly, the same as many of my friends from my neighbourhood at that time. And then it wasn't until I came out of prison and heard that the parents of the man I hit wanted to hold me account for the things that I did and wanted to tell me the truth about what the real impact was, which I could never have been able to fathom on my own. And so that was the moment when I really started to think about accountability and repairing the harm. I know we've heard in the news very recently about, particular people being accountable. Hopefully my story can kind of put a bit more context on some of those words that have been being bandished around.
I think everybody watching will and listening to you will be very moved by the fact that it wasn't prison that made you feel accountable. It was when you'd come out.
Yes, definitely. And in the book, I kind of hopefully justify why prison for me only hardened me, only made me more toxic, basically eroded my mental health and made me even worse.
You must have been very scared.
Yes, I was definitely very scared, very anxious, but my coping mechanism back then was to take that out on other people or make it other people's problems. And that's why another thing in the book that I encourage people to do is how to deal with your shame as a man. Often we are more than the worst thing we've ever done. But unfortunately, a lot of those get labelled for the worst thing we've ever done, and we have to continue trying to live with that and overcome that.
Have you spoken to James's family since you've come out of prison?
Yes, definitely. Since I came out of prison, that's when we first started speaking, and we've been speaking for the past about 8 years, campaigning together now, raising awareness that one punch can kill, trying to make sure that more people have access to restorative justice within our criminal justice system. There are so many people who are harmed by crime who don't get a voice, and who never get the opportunity to express themselves or to hold the people that harm them to account, especially because our criminal justice system kind of just says, okay, we'll determine what the punishment is, and you should be happy with that, and everybody should just be able to move on now, and you shouldn't have any psychological trauma from whatever happened to you, or and so we're just campaigning for all of those issues and men's mental health more broadly now.
And what was their reaction? What was their reaction to you meeting you for the first time?
By the time we met face to face, we'd been speaking for about 2.5 years through mediators, and so I already kind of felt like I knew them by the time we sat down and met face to face. But as you say, it was the hardest conversations I've ever had to have or listen to, but they were the ones that I needed to have for me to actually fully understand the consequences of my choices, and then give me the motivation to want to change my life.
Well, and you have been able to do that. I mean, it's an incredibly important message that you have been able to pull right from wrong. I mean, you've done a degree in criminology, yeah? And you've become a husband and a father. Now, that's interesting in itself, because how will you bring up your youngster to not fall into the same trap, and to understand that no matter how bad things get, you've got your life ahead of you, and there must be a way to pull yourself right.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just modelling the messages that I promote on a daily basis, and when they get to an old enough age to understand or even read the book themselves, hopefully I would have done a good job at doing that, modelling that behaviour, and they can go, oh, I can see why, Dad took these approaches to parenting, why he was so big on, communication and emotional literacy. And being able to, be vulnerable as a man, and to approach me about their problems, hopefully, throughout their whole lives.
Jay, what's your message to young people who are watching this interview now, who go on nights out, and it is very common to perhaps get into a fight or an altercation at the end of the night? I mean, this really is the reality, isn't it? That one punch can kill.
Yeah, definitely. One punch can kill. And I would say we've got to become a lot more accountable for the choices that we're making. Just in terms of men challenging each other when they see misogyny within their group, when they see racism within their group, or when they see violence within their group. And that's kind of the message that I'd like to put out there, is that we all need to support each other, and that hurt people. And if you are hurting people and you are having too much to drink and it's all spilling out, you've got to be accountable to talk about those problems that are spilling out. And we as a community have got to enable people to feel safe to open up and start talking about their problems more, so they're not getting drunk or making poor decisions and ruining their lives.
And don't you think it's really important? I think the message of your book is also that even no matter at the darkest times, no matter how how badly you think you've wasted your life, or you've committed something terrible that you're never going to be able to get past, that you can pull yourself through the shame, and that you can rebuild your life.
Yeah, definitely. I was in the darkest of darkest holes, and never thought that I would be redeemable in any way. And if that is a message that people can take, if he was able to turn his life around in those absolute horrific circumstances, then surely I can take some of those steps to healing myself and making better decisions. And with time, things always can get better.
Okay, your book is called Right from Wrong. Where do people get it?
It's available online, wherever you get your books from. I recorded the audio version as well, so for those that find it more difficult reading, that feel free to download the audio. Just all good bookstores really, and online, the usual.
Or Google it.
Amazon.
It's called Right from Wrong. Jacob, thank you so much. Really important message. Thank you very much